We usually steer clear of difficulty whenever we can, but I make it a point to tackle something challenging every single day. In this video, I'll lay out the 3 main reasons why I've adopted this approach, and by the end, you might feel inspired to take on a difficult task today yourself. So let's dive in. This circle right here represents where most people operate, their comfort zone. Everyone has a space where we feel safe and at ease. It usually looks like going to school or heading to our job, doing only what's required to get by. But not necessarily more than that. We often seek quick dopamine hits throughout the day on our phones or other devices. Over the weekend, we hang out with the same crew we've always socialized with, holding on to the same beliefs we've had for years, rarely considering new perspectives. Essentially, it's taking the path of least resistance. Life becomes a predictable routine with no real challenges, and we find ourselves stagnating. And it's easy to understand why the majority of people stay in this comfort zone for most of their lives. As the name implies, the comfort zone feels comfortable precisely because we aren't pushing ourselves. At first glance, there seems to be nothing wrong. Why voluntarily place yourself in struggle if you don't have to? However, if we live our lives solely within this zone, we may unknowingly do ourselves a disservice. While the comfort zone is indeed comforting, it carries one major downside. People who remain stuck here too long don't just stagnate, they often actually regress compared to where they started. When you keep doing the same things the same way over and over, your comfort zone begins to shrink. The things that used to feel easy now start to feel less so. For example, someone with social anxiety who fears interaction tends to avoid meeting new people since it lies outside their comfort zone. So instead, they prefer to spend time alone or only socialize with people they already know. And that's perfectly fine. But let's say this person starts spending less time with their current friends and even more time alone. Slowly, their comfort zone begins to shrink. Because by not confronting their fear, that fear only grows larger. Even the idea of calling up their existing friend group can become more difficult. As you can see, paradoxically, giving in to present comfort can lead to future discomfort. Just like a muscle that isn't used for an extended period of time atrophies and gets smaller, the body breaks down muscle tissue to conserve energy. There's no reason for the comfort zone to stay big. The same thing happens when we don't challenge ourselves. We become less capable of handling life's obstacles. And that's the first reason why I make it a point to do something difficult every single day. I don't want to stagnate, and I don't want the things I'm comfortable with now to become uncomfortable in the future. However, when we push ourselves and tackle something a bit more challenging, we leave the comfort zone. That's when we enter the growth zone, a space where we expand our abilities, learn, and truly grow through uncertainty and challenge. This is where we struggle and might feel like incompetent fools, but this is exactly where all real progress is made. And you've probably noticed this yourself. At the gym, you don't improve if you simply lift the same weight every single time. When learning a new language, you're not advancing if you only practice what you already know. You have to tackle fresh material and accept making mistakes at first. To improve and see progress, you have to leave the comfort zone and up the challenge. Whether that means adding more weight to your lifts, or reading something new and then trying to apply those concepts in real conversations. To recall information on your own, yes, it will be uncomfortable. Yes, you'll struggle and you'll probably feel like an idiot, but anything worthwhile requires you to push through that discomfort because the things with the biggest payoff always feel the hardest in the moment. There's no improvement without challenge, remember that. Of course, the comfort zone isn't a single zone for every aspect of life. We have multiple zones, some where we push ourselves forward, some where we stagnate, and even some where we regress. For example, you could be regressing in your social skills, stagnating at work, yet pushing yourself to the limit at the gym. It's up to each of us to identify which zone needs more work, since every area of life has its own comfort zone. And it's perfectly fine to stop progressing in some areas if you're genuinely happy with where you are. There's no need to push yourself at everything you do. Only when you're not satisfied should you consider stretching yourself. But if you're not happy with where you are, there are a few proven ways to move from comfort to growth. You probably already know which area you're kind of stuck in and want to improve upon right now. There are 3 ways to ramp up your growth, by doing it more consistently, more intensely, or for longer periods of time. All 3 strategies will increase the difficulty of whatever skill you're aiming to master. They may sound straightforward, but let's use running as an example. Doing it more consistently simply means that instead of running 3 days a week, you bump it up to 4, and that extra frequency creates a fresh challenge. But this also helps consolidate the behavior and makes it more likely that you'll stick with it long term. Secondly, doing it more intensely means performing a more potent version of your usual activity. This could be running sprints or tackling hills. Instead of operating at 60% capacity, you bump it up to 90%, upping the challenge while adding variety and enjoyment. Thirdly, doing it for longer periods simply means spending more time per session. For example, extending your run from 30 minutes to 45 or 60, which builds endurance and further increases the difficulty. And you can apply this to virtually any activity you want to improve. Learning a new language? Do it daily, maybe even multiple times a day. Increase your study session by 15 minutes. Then combine active recall with spaced repetition to retain information longer. Trying to improve your social skills. Consistently place yourself in environments where social interaction might occur. Try adding an extra sentence each time you find yourself in conversation, and take the lead by inviting people out. All three strategies, doing it more consistently, more intensely, or for longer, will move you from comfort to growth. Yet depending on the area you're focusing on, some may be more effective. For example, when learning an instrument, research shows that practicing 10 minutes every day, distributed practice, yields better results than one intense hour once a week. Also, you don't necessarily need to employ all three methods at once. It might be too much, too fast. Instead, pick one approach to start with, and once you're ready, expand from there. But we'll cover that in more detail later. As I mentioned, most of life's real gains come from short-term discomfort. That said, if something is difficult, it doesn't automatically mean it's beneficial. The area you choose to challenge yourself in must offer some form of long-term benefit, not just momentary discomfort. Studying something new, whether diving into advanced texts or grappling with complex concepts, might make you feel stupid in the moment, but absorbing that new knowledge makes you smarter over time. Eating healthily and resisting sugar cravings can be tough, but it's what enables you to get into and stay in great physical shape, lowering your risks of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease in the long run. Saving money instead of splurging, say, on a new pair of shoes, might feel hard initially, but if you invest wisely and give it enough time to grow, you'll become wealthier. These are the areas worth pushing yourself in, the ones with short-term pain but long-term gain. But there is a third zone beyond the growth zone, known as the panic zone. If you push yourself too far outside the comfort zone, you end up in the panic zone, where overwhelming stress and fear make learning and growth impossible. In the panic zone, your fight-or-flight response takes over, and unlike the growth zone, this is where you're most likely to freeze up or give up altogether. But if you push past the growth zone straight into the danger zone, you lose the ability to learn and grow. Indeed, if you overtrain, you risk serious injury that can halt your progress entirely. Likewise, if you overwork yourself, you may end up in burnout, experiencing chronic fatigue and diminished performance. And that discomfort serves as a useful alarm, alerting you when you're about to exceed your body or mind's safe limits. Because only after an injury do you realize all your previous efforts can be reversed, setting you back significantly. So it makes perfect sense why most people choose to remain in their comfort zones. They want to avoid the danger zone at all costs, but unfortunately, a lot of people, when they're looking to make a positive change in their life, go straight into the danger zone. One of my friends is like this. A few years ago, he wanted to improve his physical health. With newfound motivation, he joined the gym and made a commitment to lift weights 5 times a week. He also vowed to start a strict diet where he would reduce his caloric intake and cut out all sugar. But within 1 month, he was back to routinely sitting on the couch, watching Netflix and stuffing himself with cookies. Like most people, he took on too much, too quickly. And this is a very common trap when people try to leave their comfort zone. But failing to follow through on a plan isn't even the worst part. The real damage comes from the belief that starts to form after that failure. When they can't meet their own sky-high expectations, people start to think, I'm just not capable of change. Growth isn't for me. And that belief stops them from trying again. They stop working on themselves because in their minds, they've labeled themselves. I'm a failure. I shouldn't even try. So what's the solution here? How do we make stepping out of our comfort zone easier so we can enter the growth zone without falling into the danger zone? Positive change requires moving beyond our comfort zone, yes, but nowhere does it say that everything must be done all at once. A far more effective method is to take gradual, manageable steps. Think about it. If someone has been completely sedentary and wants to start exercising, does it really make sense to jump straight into intense weightlifting for 2 hours, 5 times a week? Your odds of success are far higher if you start with something you're genuinely capable of. Small wins pave the way for bigger victories down the line. For example, schedule a light gym session 3 times a week for 45 minutes. And only once you can sustain that habit should you ramp up the intensity. Remember, if you aren't able to commit to a small change, how can you expect to stick with a bigger one? Another benefit of taking it gradual is creating a positive feedback loop. Each time you achieve a mini goal, your brain releases dopamine, reinforcing your confidence and fueling your next step. And that evidence shows you can indeed improve and change. Even small proofs of progress light up your brain with dopamine, strengthening your belief in yourself and your abilities. This makes you feel great and more confident, fueling your persistence to push through the next challenges. Essentially, success starts to feed on itself, driving you to venture further out of your comfort zone. Plus, once a positive feedback loop takes hold in one area, it tends to ripple into others. And that is the third reason why I make it a point to tackle something difficult every single day. Whenever I'm able to do something outside my comfort zone, even if it's just a little, it kickstarts a positive feedback loop in the brain. The first win acts like the first domino. It sets off a chain reaction of further successes, naturally propelling you forward. That being said, you shouldn't push past your comfort zone in every single area every day. Doing so can be overwhelming and counterproductive. I typically challenge myself in one or two areas, while in other domains I return to the comfort zone to maintain stability. Alternating between the growth zone and the comfort zone doesn't just push my boundaries, it ensures I get enough rest and recovery. Without proper rest, I'd likely experience burnout. Yes, we want to keep growing over time, but we also need to let our comfort zone catch up to new demands. This balance prevents plunging straight into the danger zone. You push yourself only slightly above your previous comfort zone. This allows you to acclimate to the new challenge layer without overwhelming yourself. Once your comfort zone has expanded and you feel ready, you push past that boundary again. Then, when it starts to feel too much, you retract just above your previous starting point, giving yourself time to recover. Essentially, you consistently challenge yourself but also know when to pull back and catch your breath, preventing burnout. When a challenge becomes too overwhelming, you can repeat this process. Push just above your comfort zone, then retract, and push again until you reach the level you want. Another way to think of the comfort zone is as a temporary refuge, not a permanent residence. As you can see, the point of this video isn't to overexert yourself until you collapse. Rather, it's to convince you to find a worthy challenge, one that helps you improve at the things you care about. Unfortunately, many people give up at the first taste of failure or discomfort, and thus never see what they're actually capable of. If you never push yourself to the limit, how can you know where that limit lies? Consistently pushing past your comfort zones is the only way to discover and expand your true boundaries. Only those who embrace the struggle and step outside their safe zones can reach their true potential, as each challenge brings profound growth opportunities. So today, I encourage you to do something slightly more challenging. Read a few extra pages, knock out a couple more reps at the gym, or learn some new words. Try something difficult today, and I assure you, you'll be better than you were yesterday. If you find this video interesting and useful, please reply in the comments section below. Your comments and support really mean a lot to me and help the channel grow. Thank you for watching this entire video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you don't miss the next videos.